rise for the pledge. Jane will lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes.
Bob is too. I love this little thing. Very festive, yeah. It works.
It's got other things that go along with it. So you should put it up in that folder.
Okay,
It's just you, Doug. You're the only thing on the agenda.
well, we had to wait for Keith, but now that he's here, we should be good.
The goal was to get done before Keith got here. There goes that.
Congratulations, Tom. No problems are solved. So, I think Jane's the only board member that was on the board during the time of the strategic plan, and I believe Jim is the only one that's on the board besides Jane that was involved in the strategic plan. So they will correct me anywhere I need correction.
I was, yeah.
You were on it? Okay, so at the end. Sorry, because it started like in 21. It went for like 3 years.
We were right at the end.
Right at the end. Okay.
I was on as a parent.
On as a parent. All right.
That's what I meant.
There you go, as a parent. Was there anyone else? Because it was a long process. So, quick overview of the strategic plan or how it started. It was at a conference. A couple board members were talking, wanting to get a documented strategic plan down. From there, we went out. We decided to get an organization to help us with it. It was PLC. We hired them on, and they came in. And as they started, they were, met with the board of different people, and turned to the superintendent and said, "Now, how would we be moving forward with this?"
I think it's working out too that this all started, and then COVID hit, and we pushed through COVID and kept doing it virtually. Just putting it out there, because I think that impacted some people.
Probably. I think COVID impacted everything. And at that point, I looked at the PLC and I said, "Well, this is being directed by the board, not the superintendent." And they were like, "What?" Because they were a little confused. Because usually strategic plans, the initiation of one, you get one done, is done by a board. Who carries it out, the how, the what charter, which do we want, is by the superintendent. In doing that, then the board was heavily involved with different meetings. You can see a list of all the community members on the last page of all the different people that were involved in different aspects of it. The different committees were filed. We went through and it was broken down. Surveys were done out to the public. From that survey, outside out to the public, went to staff, to students, and from there we built, or it was done. We redid the vision of the district, redid the mission, came up with the belief statements, which we hadn't had belief statements until the strategic plan. We did have a vision and mission, but not belief statements. And then there was 3 main parts to it, where it had student experience, it has communication, and on this it says buildings and grounds, but I tried to rebrand it to facilities because I think that's more explicit. So in it, it was always presented as this is a living document that has to be redone. We talked about it before and saying how it's really lacking and not having anything with instruction in it, even though it does talk about MTSS. And so like my first thing with the board of hearing this is, who is going to lead in redoing this? Is it going to be something the board is directing themselves, or is it going to be turned over to what PLC was? And I'm not saying we're going back to PLC. I think it's definitely something we can do here internally without them. That would be my recommendation. But is it something that the board is going to direct and run with, or is it going to be something that the superintendent and administrative team is going to lead this time? I think that's the first big question, because from there comes the how it's developed.
8, there is.
Well, and I'm glad more people were involved, because you got to see how different aspects were run with it and how it would be done.
It's
very different between the two.
It's a good question, and I was involved all the way through. And if you look at that long list of people at the end, there's a lot of them dropped off, you know, during. From being involved in every single meeting, from the beginning to end, I strongly do not feel that it's something that the board should direct. I think it got really messy, and I don't think it ended up serving the purpose that it was supposed to. I think there's some good things that came out of it, and I think the board had input on it, but going through those meetings, I just don't think it was a very efficient or fruitful experience. And it became, as the people fell off, because it became longer and longer, there was a couple of people that started wanting to direct it in the exact way they wanted to go, and then the people remaining got to witness me and those people arguing for hours on end. I just think that's something that I think the superintendent should direct, and if we can, you know, give input on, and that after it comes out. That is really my feeling on it after being intimately involved.
I see a couple different things to look at. When you're talking about the direction of the district, that is one of the things that the board is directly responsible for, and that we help shape that. And I think that was where we were, it was at, as I said, it was at an NISBA conference. We were in a session where a school district walked us through their strategic plan, and it kind of put a bee in somebody's bonnet. We really needed a strategic plan to help us solve some of the issues that we were facing at the time. And thought that this would be a way to make it so that more people would have a voice in the direction, but I think ultimately when letting more people have a voice didn't take it in the direction that person wanted it to go in, it started coming back. Plus, we went through a process to hire PLC, and ultimately I don't think they were the best fit for us.
Yeah, we started off with 2 individuals, and then they didn't seem to be a good fit, so we switched to 2 other ones.
You know, but I think there's a lot about how they did things, what they said they were going to do, and what actually ended up being done isn't the same thing. That's where I think COVID came into play, because I don't think what they normally would do was something that they could do with COVID. But through the whole process, there were so many points where I was just like, this should be really decided by administrative people. Like they're the ones that should be coming to us and saying, this is where we see the needs in the district. They're the people who boots on the ground. They're getting it from the faculty. You know, I think we need to trust our own process. What I would say, I would want to see us hiring a company. I agree with Doug that this can be done in-house. And I think it works better when you have the educators come to us and say, this is what we see, the vision, the future of our district. This is how it plays out educationally. This is why it's good for our students. This is how it impacts our students. This is how it impacts our faculty. And then by sharing that information with us, then ultimately the board can make recommendations and policies based on the recommendations coming from our administrators. I just think that works, and that worked for us for a really long time, and then all of a sudden we did this strategic plan, and it sort of sent everything in strange places. And a lot of what we're doing, I don't think we're doing it because of the strategic plan. I think we're doing it because it's what's best practices in education. It just happens that it fits with the strategic plan. I think we've been doing it anyway.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think you have input. What you have to understand is looking back at this, is what PLC, what they did they have a skeleton or a punch list or how, and all they wanted us to do was to go through and add window dressing to their, their punch card, their plan, and they said add nice pictures. The problem was, no, because it's a strategic plan, it was really laid out, day one you were going to do a mission and then follows all the way through. The problem was, it was being directed to do something totally different than even what PLC was set to do. This was a canned, I'm sure it's a good document, it was a canned thing, you just look like plug and play things, and that's not what happened. It turned into a battle royal, but I think what Jane is saying, we were doing it backwards. The administration and the teachers, should come up with the plan and the skeleton, and then the board and parents can have input on that. But it got too wild. I mean, if you read this, like Jane said, we have to do a lot of this. Anyways, but there's like 20, 27 of them, 85% of respondents to the annual literature survey will strongly agree with these statements. They're not even surveys that we have in place. Do you know what I mean? So we started to come up with like ideas, but because we were missing the teachers and we were missing the administrators, we were coming up with things that just weren't even practical inside of school. That's why I think that we definitely have input on and feedback, but I don't think we should read it again, just because I lived that experience. And when Doug said, and Jane said it was a long experience, it went well over a year. Did you know what I mean? And these meetings weren't, these were very long meetings. Did you know what I mean? And we just could never, what happened, we honestly spent, I'm not lying to you, 8 months on the mission statement. And so the problem was that everything else started to get rushed through because we were arguing over 2 and 3 words in the mission statement for 3 hours at a time. That's really strong we were arguing.
I got a question. Do we need a strategic plan?
I think though, I'm going to answer it a different way.
Okay.
No, you don't if you have a superintendent that has it all in his head and you can read what's in his mind. And that's kind of where the argument came out about is anytime a question was asked, here's where it is, here's where we're going, and all the plan was there. But if you didn't have the superintendent sitting next to you, you had nothing to refer to. And I think that's where the nice piece is. So when administrators, board members, or someone's asked a question, we have a plan, we have a framework. Here's why we're doing what we want. I want to do something. Let's see where that would fit in here for that request. And I think that's where the importance of it comes in, that it's a transparent document that everyone can see what's in the leadership's mind of where we're going.
Is there anything that influences the strategic plan as far as maybe either monies, headcount, administration? Like, as you're developing a strategic plan, you're almost in a sense developing a roadmap of what you're going to do the next 12 months, 24, 36, whatever that looks like, right? Question becomes directly, what external influences may come up as, we build this out and say we want to upgrade everything and build new buildings and all that in a strategic plan, but there clearly must be some level of external influences that sort of influence
For how this one was developed, financial restraints were not any consideration. So if you want to do something, and I'll pick one, a capital project, obviously you have to use money.
Right.
Adding clubs and activities for students, obviously you have to have money. So with those things, even though there's a desire and the capacity, or even though there's a desire, you have the capacity through funding to do that. And that's where those impediments were taken into account. The strategic plan was written out for 5 years to try to accomplish these things in 5 years, trying to work through those barriers that come up. But that's where sometimes things just can't be accomplished or other priorities come up. When this was started, people internally in education saw the beginning of social emotional concerns, but it wasn't to the extent it is now. And for whatever reason, instruction wasn't considered, if you think of our main missions, instruction wasn't really a highlight of any one area in this. It was basically about how can students have good experience here at school, which is important. How can you have communication so that people know what's going on, which is important, and then facilities, how are things designed? And there's one very lofty goal in here, which I don't know how that could even be in here. It's a really nice one, where our buildings would parallel industry entranceways. so that when kids walk into colleges or companies, they feel comfortable going in for an interview because it looks familiar to them. Lofty goal, but I don't see how that could realistically be accomplished, you know, with the restraints we have here with our buildings and everything.
So, like in the absence of the strategic plan, that's what we decided,
Well, I'm not saying not to have
No, no,
one.
no.
Okay.
We're brainstorming,
Yeah.
right? So, how do we track, like, the vision and the roadmap for our district? Like, where we want our district to be in 5 years? Is that 10 years? Down, like, what are the best practices in other schools to track, other than something being superintendent's head? How do we
Right.
track our vision?
That's done because we have the vision and mission. I thought it was great to add the beliefs in here. We didn't have them, and I never thought of having them. Where it's tracked then is at the district planning conference. That's why that was a 2-day event where the buildings come in and the district goals are developed from the information given by the principals, and the principals present how they have done on their goals to move towards the district goals and towards the vision. The goals of the district really shouldn't change on a yearly basis. The goals of the district should be something that takes time, and that's really when you look at a strategic plan. When you look at any one of the numbers, strategic intent is what they word here, that's a goal. So these are the goals of the district of what they're driving to. So even when you look, what the principals did then is they took their PowerPoints that they've been doing years with their goals and what they're working on at their building, and just tied them into a strategic intent number 1, strategic intent number 2, strategic intent number 3, for the ones that they took care of in instructional setting. Dave Carlin come in with the facilities, that's what that would tie into those strategic intents. So all this really did was take what we were already doing with the building goals and put it in a different framework that was out there.
That's like year to year, right?
The goals, if they're done right for a district, should not change year to year. Because if you can accomplish it in 1 year, that's great, but usually the goal should be, you know, you want to improve instruction, the capacity of student reading, or something, that you want to have a greater competency for students by the time they reach 4th grade. That's going to be a multi-year process, and then what you see in there would be the building's goals of what they're working on to reach that district goal. And what it's called, I spent a lot of time with previous boards working on what we call cascading goals, where the district has its district goals, which have objectives. Those objectives are then the building goals, which have objectives under those, and those are the goals of departments or grade levels. And then those have their objectives under, which are like the goals of the teachers. And that's how they all work. And the teachers report back to the building report back to the district reports back, you know, would be the reports at the district planning conference. So it just paralleled what we were doing, it just put it in a different framework. And it pulled out different focuses than what the building goals had been before.
Yeah, I mean, in the conference, I just feel like those are short-term goals, like a year out, like, okay, what did we do last year, what do you do next year, but not like long-term goals.
For the,
Like, I'm trying to understand. Like,
the principles are shorter goals because their short goals ladder into the goal of the district.
So I think Doug said it really well when he started out, about how when you have a good superintendent who has the idea in his head, the transfer of what's in his head and what he's doing, he gives to the board through our board meetings and through district planning and whatnot. So when we first started this, I kept saying, I don't know why we need this. We know what we're doing for the next few years. Doug's told us, you know, the superintendent has told us, and it kept coming back, but there's not a document for people to see. You have to go back and watch all the board meetings. You have to go sift through things to find it. And so what I kind of felt like was that they just wanted a document, like I kept referring to it as a pretty bow on a package, you know, so that there was one spot that somebody could go to. I don't think that we needed to necessarily do all of this that we did. What we probably should have done was to just take everything and cull all the information. We could have created our own document. And I would say, I don't see why we don't do that, rather than going through a company and doing a whole huge study like this again. I don't think we need that.
I don't think we don't do that to answer other, questions directly. It's, as far as the follow, that's up to us as board members, and at the last, and we follow through superintendent, and we, the last month or so, we do that, and now we're communicating, quarterly with the superintendent on where we think he's doing, and we set the long-range goals. And so I think, Heather, what do we call it? What Jane's saying, a document, the administration leads it. That's the way it's got to be done. And then when they come, they'll come. I was going to say plan now. The administration should just call it a plan. They present it to us. At that point, we're going to be like, yay or nay or change this. And then after that is finalized, then it's going to be up to us to follow up and hold the superintendent are those goals being achieved. If we did it this way, we came up with by 27, Iroquois developed, share, and implement an action plan based on critical analysis and review of all structured spaces district-wide, determine which is in the best interest of teaching and learning. And so that was a goal. But what does that even mean? So I think it's up to us then, after the administration and teachers come up with a plan or an idea and we approve it, then we follow up. And that's one of our board goals, was to provide more communication, develop to our superintendent, which we were doing. And one of his goals was, to approve the Green Commission back to us. And I think that's how it takes place.
I think when I'm looking at the strategic plan, we should define what that is, right? I mean, by definition, it's a strategic plan, so general, and it has dates on it of 21 to 27. I don't know. We'll just say that as I'm listening to everybody talk, I think the current direction, as I'm just taking everybody's information, is that the current strategic plan does two things. One, it memorializes district planning that kind of gives you that short-term repository of information that says, hey, here's where we were, here's where we're going, right? And this is the next 12 to 24 months as an example. The other part of the strategic plan, as I understand, it gives you that vision, right? That next 3, 5, maybe even 7 years of a direction. But to Jim's point, having something so abstract as what he just read is extremely abstract. There's no direct content to it. You actually, from my perspective, can't hold anyone accountable because it's too abstract. So that's, what I'm seeing from the definition of a strategic plan, I think it could do two things if it makes sense. Kind of memorializing the district planning, but also touches on that vision and direction of where we as the current board feel the district needs to head, but to understand that this is a living document, and my recommendation or my interest maybe would be to make sure that it's updated every 12 months, right? So it's not necessarily 21 to 27, but it's just it's revised every 12 months, it's reviewed, and then we can continue moving that forward as an active document.
Yeah, and I might add yes to that, because I would think if you have a good strategic intent, you would be giving updates at least every 12 months. Some of them might be sooner. And you may or may not change it depending on what's happening, but what you're seeing every 12 months, it's out for 5 years or 3 years, whatever, for whatever intent it is. But you're seeing the touchstones, which Heather was saying that when they see it at the district planning conference, what are the yearly things we're doing to make progress towards that intent, towards that, what I refer to as a district goal, and I think strategic intent number 1 or district goal is about the same thing. I see a great argument where you could say the different areas are the goals, whereas the student experience is goal number 1, improving that, improving facilities is goal number 2, communication is goal number 3, and then the objectives under it are the intents, or the definition of what they are. Either way, I think you're doing the same thing where you're setting something up of where you want to get to, and then you're monitoring your progress along the way, and who's doing the work of making the progress, depending on what it is. I'm just looking at strategic intent number 1, where it talks about multi-tiered system support with instruction and so on and interventions, and it says, here are the action plans, communicate with the community about the MTSS model. We've done that, it's on our website, we've communicated. Done. Through our partnership with consultants, provide staff development to strengthen the MTSS implementation. We've done that. So technically, we're done with that strategic intent. Is it where we want it to be, to have a high-quality system? No, but we've done all the strategies and done everything, and that's where I think this is lacking.
And to kind of touch on that too, it's also those two items, those, from my perspective, are tough to measure, right? What are the metrics you're driving towards? What's that number? What's the data? You know, when is good enough good enough? And so, I mean, you could take this and work the next 20 years at that single statement and then try to incrementally get better. But I think for also a community, a strategic plan should fundamentally speak to the details or gaps that we currently have, right? You know, reading program maybe as one of them, or other areas that we can improve that we actually have a primary focus to, that says over the next 12 months we really want to get better at that, so that way we're not just leaving that off to the side because it's not fancy enough to put in a strategic plan. So, I mean, in the way that I'm reviewing information, it kind of all sits with the superintendent as a responsibility, and ultimately, from my perspective, a scorecard on how good or bad we're doing, and then also what has influenced the output of it, right? Because some things we can put in there, and finances could influence the output, you're never going to get there, right? Headcount can influence the output, you're never going to get there. Or you incrementally make 2%, we wanted 10, and it's because of external influences. I think my interest would be is to make sure that the document is useful, it communicates a message, and that people can read it and reference it to kind of know where we've been, and then also where we are today, and then the direction of where we want to go tomorrow. If the strategic plan has that, and I agree with Jim 100%, it really isn't the board's responsibility until there is information to make a different decision. So I kind of firmly believe it's the superintendent's responsibility for this.
Public has to be able to look at it and then measure it. And I think, once again, that's where we go down, like when we say, I think 100% of our K-12 students with support from staff will develop, monitor, and set personalized goals. Well, how does it mean? What does it measure? Mary Jo, what does that mean? If a young student wants to be a TikTok star, that's awesome.
I
But that's
remember
our
the
personalized
conversation.
goal. But we think, how do we measure that?
Yeah.
And the point is, we are a school. So I mean, that's an awesome intent. But if we were to measure that right now, we could do it. If our parents were to measure that right now, they could do it. It's like 100% will celebrate their personal goals. What is a personal goal? We can all, you know what I mean? How do we then incorporate that into the academic structure? It's what I'm saying. That's why I'm just going back with what Keith said. It's got to come from Doug, so it could be for the administration, so it can be measured, and then we can have input on it.
And when the strategic plan was being put together, were they ever considering like adding curriculum to any part of the strategic plan? That seems like a gap. Maybe it's not.
No. They had,
I'll-
oh, go ahead.
I don't know, just wondering.
It really does.
No, great question.
It stems from the fact that there was a lot going on in social media and a lot of conversation about things that had nothing to do with curriculum. And how do I say this? There was a constant barrage of attacks on things that, because there wasn't a document that a board member could say, it's here, and they.
I can defend my position because I'm doing this because it's here.
Because it's here. And that, I think, made it complicated for a few people, and they wanted this document. So they pushed for this document. And the way that they saw that fast happening was by hiring a company and having somebody from outside of the district look into the district to see, were we really interpreting what was being said on social media accurate? Was that accurate about, accurate statements about where our district was and where we wanted to go? and they felt like that outside source investigating that, doing this would help.
Yeah, it was interesting, how they came, I think important thing to say, because we keep referring to singular, sounds like a singular person before, we have to
No, it was
remember.
a couple.
But we have to remember, as a board as a whole, 7 people voted yes to move forward.
Yeah,
So
we
it's
did.
the direction
We
of
did.
the
We
board.
all
So,
agreed.
you know, just for the public watching, I wanted to be clear that it was the majority of the board always approved going forward with everything. It wasn't a singular person. Different driving factors within board decisions, but the board ultimately has to agree as a group.
And then,
They did a survey of the different stakeholders, community, parents, students, teachers, staff, administration, and from there it came out areas that were red. And then you got to pick which red areas you wanted to address. Curriculum was not one of the areas to be addressed. Now, I don't remember if it was red, green, or thing, but they said, where that is good enough, these are the areas we want to hit. How? It was the group decision at the time.
We were doing
This is
really
where we
well
went.
curriculum-wise, and the areas that were
We were, I want to rephrase that.
different.
We believe these areas were in greater need of attention than curriculum.
and
I think you can always do better in any area.
And that was the kind of maybe the nice way to say it, and I think the board adopted this week's plan, but then once it got rolling, what happened is, and I was there as a parent, you had, and there wasn't one person, but you had a bunch of people who wanted to go in this direction, you had a company that wanted to go in this direction, and a bunch of parents said, we're not going in that direction. That's not happening. So the whole theory that some people want to use to shape the culture and the experience of the Iroquois, they wanted to shape it in a particular way, and that's not what PLC wanted to do, and that's not what a lot of the parents wanted to do. So, I mean, to your point, curriculum is super important, Heather, and that's what should be wrong, but I'm not lying. We spent 4 months on the word tradition and inclusively. And so did 4 months on those 2 words.
Well, I think we can all agree on that.
Thank you. We have 2 new words we're going to talk
So
about.
it became a lost opportunity to push the district forward because you had 3 directions pulling in different ways, and we ended up with a bunch of nice sounding stuff that, to Keith's point, you can't do anything with this other than it sounds really cool.
And I think the historical look back is helpful, kind of referencing where we've been. And, that helps ground us, do we want to take that same path? It seems like it doesn't make sense. And then also where we're going. So this is kind of a bit of an inflection point to say, okay, we have the opportunity to, I will call it pass the baton a little bit, but have the document a little more functional, a little more meaningful, so that it can actually be used. Because I'm reading it now, just referencing it again, I read it before. I find it so abstract as we sit here today that it's not even current, it's not even applicable. So how is it even being used? I think our go forward plan needs to be very different.
And one of the things is that each year we're supposed to be doing a whole big blow-up survey. We haven't been doing, right?
No, the board made a decision
Not you.
a couple years ago. There's a price tag with it.
Right.
I believe it was about, 10 grand. And they said, well, we would like to accomplish that another way, rather than spending money just because of where we are, we want to
And
put
the
money
number of people
towards
that
students.
participate.
Right, and that way, and not just, it wasn't just a price tag. As a board, we said, if we got, if we have, 2,300 students?
Yeah.
2,300 students, and 65 people are answering the survey, and then we're making decisions based on 65 people for, 2,300 plus their family. Was the data that was coming in that survey truly reflective and relevant? And we said, we can't make these decisions based on only, and I think we got on like 35 people, right?
I'm sorry?
The last survey was like 35 people.
It was low.
So and now you got 35 people, and we can't ship a whole district on just 35 people when there's 2,300 students. That was my concern.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the task force members. You had 3 of administrators, you had 3 people from the central office, and 3 building administrators. And then, and I didn't the teachers yet, but you had a lot of people that had views from the outside looking in or might not have been in it. And I think they're all very valuable. I think everyone's opinion is very valuable. I like the framework of this. I think I would restructure some of the titles. I think communication always has to be part of any goal, strategic plan, and I think that, I say that always, like from now and forever, because how you communicate is going to change, methods of communicating, it just always has to be there trying to improve it. I think infrastructure, I really like to refer to as facilities, is a very important part of it. You're going to have constraints with that because of financial.
And we just did a
I mean, you
building
get-
review.
The building review, which to me, that takes care of a lot of it, and then you get to the meat and potatoes of it, which just says student experiences. I think students' experience is part of the instructional process. And I think that one I'd like to revamp, I would revamp that one. And this is where I think the board comes, like, what are the areas you want to do for goals of the district? And I think if you're taking care of communication to the public, I guess you could put another one for finances in there, but that's almost so self-evident you don't need it as a goal to be fiscally, solvent. And instructional experiences and develop those in a way that when the principals report out annually on the yearly progress towards the larger goal of what they're willing to do. I mean, right now, there should be in here, with instruction, improving the reading program at the elementary level. We saw the data, everyone saw the data, that should be something. Honestly, it's not part of the strategic plan. I don't know why we're spending time on it. Except it's the most important thing to do, having kids come out literate.
So I just have a question, because we only have one point of reference, which is the current strategic plan, right? Does it make sense, and this is for everybody on the board, does it make sense perhaps to have Doug, document a table of contents is what's in my head that kind of outlines the structure of what the strategic plan may look like? The content within it, not necessarily the full content, but build a TOC that says here's kind of the topics, the areas, the items of importance, different pieces that that I think are important to the community, to the district, to the administration, to kids, and then ultimately the students. I think if that seems appropriate, then we can have additional information to say, oh, well, yeah, that's probably a better direction than versus trying to, reuse the existing boilerplate and just fitting that in.
You said an interesting thing here, it's like an aha moment. You said the words interest of the community, interest of students, interest of staff, and so on. The survey that came in did focus on the interests of people. The question was, how are we doing with this? People could say terrible, and then behind the scenes say, but I really don't care. But you're doing terrible with it, but I really don't care that my daughter does not come out learning how to ride a horse. But it could have made it in here, and that's where I think, what is the interest? What do people want? We talked about financial literacy at the last board meeting. I think that's a great thing to have in a plan that people have out. I think people in the community would be interested in it, and knowing how are we doing it. In fact, we have a presentation a week from today on it, of what the high school is doing, and I think that would be a good thing in here. So,
And you're going to have to rely on it with the new graduation requirements.
and we're going to rely on that, which Dr. Dudek will be talking about at the next meeting too. So,
Right.
preamble to everything.
It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, and so I think that's it. And I'm not saying I want to create things of interest, but here are the topics that I think should fall, and then we look at them and say, okay, do we think this is a high interest or no interest, or should these two topics kind of be blended together under what do we call that, strategic intent, intent and strategies, but under the goal, instead of student experience, it should be instruction. And under instruction, we have 3 or 4 key areas: literacy, finance, being able to be in the workforce. And when I say that, being able to be in the workforce, I mean for college, kids who are going to college, when they get done with college can be in the workforce, or students who right from high school can be in the workforce. All of them need to know how to be in the workforce, because eventually they end up there, whether it's after high school or years later.
Could I suggest though that we keep the mission, vision, and belief statements, because they're good sounding?
My interest was, I want to see really, as a board, like, I'd like to see something created that is not this, but something that is usable, right? Personally, my perspective, absolutely. Like, that to me is foundational. And I think it really sets the tone
But
of
it
who
speaks
we
to the
are,
history.
what we're doing, in the direction that we're going. And then ultimately, if you have newcomers coming into the community, it's a document that can be referenced to say, here, this is who we are. Yes, we got a website, we got all this other stuff and fancy Red Hawk stuff, but this is something that is a little bit more applicable to what we're doing. Because people sometimes really like to get into the details.
Sorry about that, Tax. It was just some superintendents are starting to talk about tomorrow and what's happening outside. No, it's not canceling school, they're starting. So I just answered on it. I'll think about it afterwards. I didn't want you to think I was making a grocery list.
Well, they're going to find out their white crayons.
So,
Yep.
execution of the toilet.
A good working community with other superintendents. It'd be interesting to see how other districts, what the best practices are. for what-
So ironically, Jane mentioned the presentation they went to from there was a superintendent presenting about their district. That superintendent based what they did off the conversations and mentoring I gave. I'm not trying to brag, I'm just saying where they got it from. But, so I think that's great because that's what we do. We do look at each other, we do talk to each other and looking what's going forward, especially as many. Okay, so they're just saying they'd like to do it tonight. I'm glad we're not televising this. I'd like to do it tonight rather than wait for the morning to help out with the people. No one's closing yet, just to keep you updated. And so I think that is good where we look at the other districts around us to see what is, what they're doing, what they think is on the forefront of theirs. Again, I come back to reading, not to focus on instruction, but to focus on instruction, because all of New York State is focusing on reading right now. So to me, that's like a no-brainer to put in there.
But that's also a fundamental gap too. If you get into a strategic plan that's not applicable, and somebody will look at it and say, we don't even have what you need tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, if you need something tomorrow, you've talked about it, and it's not in your strategic plan. And the validity of the strategic plan then goes out the window. That's why I think if we're going to do it, it has to be applicable, it has to be usable, and it has to be relevant, and somehow measurable in a way that we know that this is the area of focus today, right? And we can have our vision, our 3 to 5 year vision, whatever that looks like, because nothing gets done in 12 months. 24 months, you can kind of start seeing something. By 36 months, you'll really start gaining some momentum. But most importantly, how we're doing and what's that, I will call it the feedback loop into current state, right? Like, what is the current community? What's the economic state of the community, of the region, of the area? Because that also influences the way that we decided today how we wanted to go versus, 4 years from now.
If we take this back to you and say, Doug, we're putting it back in your hands.
I'd say thank you. I would be happy.
You have an idea of how you would do this that makes sense, that would make this flow well, that we wouldn't come up against the kinds of barriers that we had with this, COVID notwithstanding. Do you have an idea in mind of how you would do this if we hand it back to you?
I have a couple different ideas in my head of the directions I'd like to go, but I wouldn't want to work with the administrators in vetting out which is the best possible one. I think you definitely need to get input from teachers and staff. I think that's very important about it and the core foundation. I think developing how that's going to happen, whether it's through department heads or people who volunteer to be on it, or we try to solicit certain people to be on it. Because I always there are people that always volunteer, but then there's always a quiet majority that come in and do their work that have views but don't express them. So how can you get the greatest number of people in there but not have too many people that overloads it? I like coming back to reading because we've been focusing on that. And so with reading, we're starting it now. And Jim and I were talking, and another superintendent was there, and he said, well, you know, the first year, I really don't want to hear about it as a superintendent because you're just learning what's in there. Second year, I'll start to hear things. Third year, so to Keith's point, these are things that we're doing that are going to be multi-year. So that's why it's not something you run and develop in a month or 2 months. It is a longer process that has to be developed to get people together and vet out ideas. And so how I would start off with it is going back to the administrators and saying, I have some exciting news. We are going to be updating the strategic plan. I would want to keep the framework basically the same, maybe retitle some of the stuff so it's clear. This is the main topic, kind of cascading souls, like here's our recommendations to the board of the district goals, and under that here are steps we want to do in the different grade levels. And then how do we figure out what are those areas we're going to work at, and to then develop the steps afterwards.
So,
I think a follow-up question then, how is that different from what you did pre this strategic plan?
We had 3 building administrators on it, 3 central office people, and
No,
I
I'm
was...
saying pre this plan.
Oh, pre this plan?
Yes. How is that different from how you created the direction of the district?
I guess going back to what Heather said, I think that's a great place to be, because we talked about things at the board and there wasn't a document. So when she stated at the district planning conference, I heard about how they did that year, they could take what they heard that year to see how that fit into what we're trying to accomplish 5 years. So they have this document here, so when the principal was talking about it, they could go, oh, that's right here, and they've made progress. They're in year 3 of their progress, and they're having trouble here, so what can we do as a board to help them? Is it more finance? Is it trying to lobby our people to get something here? Is it trying to understand, get better communication out of us as a board members to the public? Or is it just understanding why we have to change this program over here, or it's going to spend longer as we communicate to the public? And it's really the knowledge of the board of just knowing what's happening. I guess I look at the board really as your representatives of the community to monitor the direction we're going. And if you, as members of the community, don't feel we're going the direction you're going, you voice, we don't like that direction. We would rather veer a little bit to the right and focus more on this. We should, administrators show data of why or why not we agree with you. And then based on that, a decision is made, and that's the path we take. But it really, there needs to be a focus on instruction. There just needs to be. That's what we're here to do.
So to kind of like circle back or bring it home, is that kind of I'm hearing we'll keep the vision, the mission, and the belief statements, and then it's, whether we call it strategic plan or whatever it's called, not right now, the superintendent will put together a framework and bring it back to us, and then we can put input on it. Here's the next question. 2 of them. Doug, how long would it take to do the framework, and what are, as a board, what do you think we would like to hear back?
Well, I think that, like, the whole,
3 days.
Actually,
No problem. I'll tell you on Saturday. We'll tell you what I'm in here.
so like in the corporate environment, right? I mean, you want to fail fast. I don't want you to go like work on something for 6 weeks and like, oh, that's right, that's not anything that we want. Like,
That's what I'm saying. So, yeah, what do we think?
I mean, don't say like 3 months. Like, let's talk about it in our multi-board meetings to make sure that it's heading in the right direction, so you're not wasting people's time, our time, people that are contributing. It's just an iterative approach to reviewing what it would look
like
like.
to just have like
Having that,
just a
Yeah,
framework.
I think
Yeah.
I was going to say.
I think by January, what I'd like to have to the board is a plan and timeline for how to develop it.
Okay.
Because then you can say, well, that's way too long, or are you sure you have enough time? Because remember, we also have things we're working on now. So it's, you know, struggling a little bit because we're trying to get the MTSS, the whole framework of that written down in the document. But it's taking a little longer because of all the different issues that, I don't want to say issue sounds negative, but important factors we have to take care of on a timely basis. I was hoping to have that done by January, and we're not going to have it done. just because, like, I lost a whole meeting in October because of just what was happening that we had to address, it took 2 hours of us to meet. So I want to put the timeline together, get that to you by January. So within that, I have to meet with the administrators to see where they feel that they could be in there to have input. Who is going to be the core team that's going to be on this? Because we have 4 elementary principals, do all 4 need to be on it, or could it be 2? High school has 3 administrators, do all 3 administrators need to, or could it be 1 that's the key person? I tend to like to say, like, high school have all 3 be there. There's 1 core person there that reports back. Middle school has 2. I would think there would be 1 core person that would be there in the office, not 2. And that way that allows the other person to take care of other business.
With the winter break and everything, but January is still a realistic goal?
I think so because it's work to do a timeline, but I think it's just getting the right people in the room to have a discussion for a couple hours because, here's what we want to do and here's how long we think each piece is going to be. Will it be right? I hope so. Will it be exact? No. Because for this strategic plan, we planned on it, but there's some influences caused 4-month discussion on words. We didn't foresee that coming. And so, is COVID going to pop up again? We didn't foresee that coming. Knock on wood, I don't think it is. And that's why I would hope by January we could have a framework for a timeline. I think after that, you're going to see the bigger gaps that Heather was talking about. Would you call that fail fast? Fail fast.
So maybe every month, every board meeting, we should talk about the progress, hey, what do you have now?
Because there are some months we won't be able to get to it late. That's why I'm hoping during December. Yeah, maybe I should say February because what time? Our board meeting is the 11th. Or January 8th. I should probably say February because I'm just thinking about the Christmas parties and everything. And I know I tend to be aggressive with my timelines. That's a fault of mine. I try to push and get things going. So I'd say February I'd get back to you with timeline. That would be more fair to the administrators.
So I just have a question.
Yeah.
I think timeline you're spot on because that's a longer lead time. I guess I'm just thinking in my mind if we could get a draft of the framework to notionally know that these are the topics. Now again, draft meaning this isn't exactly what it's going to be. It's pre-feedback, but it goes back to what I think Heather said is identifying best practices, a little bit of research, and using the boilerplate that's already existing to say, hey, this is kind of the direction. Here are the topics. Now you can add more, subtract, whatever, but I think that would be helpful unless you feel like, hey, listen, we just can't do it. Timeline for me is that's a heavier lift. I know what that means when you say timeline, where you're putting all those pieces together.
I think and that's what I want to. I would kind of want it to do the 2 at this timeline and topics at the same time.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is if we're going to talk about facilities, I think that's a very short topic. Building condition survey, we already have our discussion on it. Done.
Right.
We start talking about instruction, and then you have the different grade levels because the reading initiative would be much different if there is any at the high school level compared to it. And so you do the big umbrella of instruction, but what are the topics under there of what to do?
My view is more like hitting those, like the instruction, hitting the larger topics.
Well, the larger topics, I can tell you right now, instruction, curriculum, and facilities. I'm done with those.
Okay.
So I can tell you tonight.
Okay.
Now, if you have other ones you want to add, I'd be more happy to talk about it, but I think that covers the big things. The only thing the board wanted to put in there would be finances, but again, that is so dictated by taxes and the state. You're not going to change it. You'd just be wasting time talking about the finances of the district.
Actually, the finances are a result of the strategic plan. Because the finances.
Well, the finances you need out of it, but when I'm saying finances, trying to control how much money you make to bring in, you can't do that. No. Finances would be under those 3 topics. Yeah. What do we need for finances, for communication? Do we need to we need to put so much money towards our website. Should we do more? We float different ideas of positions. Do you want to go that path or not do that? We've always said no because of how we're doing it. And that's an interesting thing too, because if you look at an industry communication, you want to reach a bigger and bigger population that you can support with your product. We have a limited geographic area And we are, I don't want to say sole provider because they can go to private institutions, but we are pretty much that. And so our communication is very limited. We don't have to try to sell a product. We just have to try to inform people.
And I don't know if this necessarily needs to be in like a roadmap per se, but I think succession plan, like looking at,
We're already talking about that in executive session.
okay,
We got two pieces we're already talking about.
okay. I'm just kind of looking at, you know,
Yeah.
our community, our staff, and, you know, even, not to point him out, but Dave Carlin, when he was going to the facility meetings, I was thinking, you know, and, district, who's following up Dave Carlin right now?
We have someone actually doing that.
But yeah, but-
And like, you know, to, you know,
But I
getting
think,
the baton out for people.
yeah, but just
Frustrating.
not to use a name, but that question you're asking is going to be addressed. You know.
For some people, not all.
Yeah.
But I'm just in general, like.
It will be.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I wrote
So
that
that's
down.
an air next week.
That's next week.
Next week.
Well, I say we have that going.
Yeah, I think we got it.
I think so, and I actually think February is a more practical timeline. I think January is tight.
It's over.
January, so yeah, just start looking at it.
Because we're gonna look at it and say, oh, well, we need this, and
I
this.
forget what the date is, and then get the holidays and the concerts, and the principals will be able to focus on it because parents will be coming in for different events. Yeah.
That's why I said, for January.
I heard you, I reflected.
I think,
Girls taking you to, go!
I think we've got him there, and I think we're all in agreement on where we are, and there's no really reason to start, putting the cart before the horse right now.
Did you ask about student? Oh, wait, there is more information.
Okay.
I personally, and I'll go on record as saying it, if a kid can go outside and play, they can come to school. That is a snow day, you should be shoveling your driveway. Someone off the
Before we have that conversation, are we all in agreement with the next step we just outlined?
Yes.
Can you repeat those, Rose?
Yes, strategic tower, we want to call it, we're going to hand that back to the superintendent. The superintendent, by the February board meeting, is going to report back, provide the structure, provide the overview, what he's thinking, we'll add comment and pick it up at that point in time.
And like Heather said, succession planning, maybe we do want an area in there. It might be limited of what we put in there because we don't want to have personnel out there, but we can talk about in general of what.
But that'll be in your plan, come back to us.
I wrote it down so I don't forget.
So that's a concept, right?
Right.
So like, when you look at succession planning, the concept is this, and it's not definitive, it's more conceptual.
Because you still have to be open to,
Yeah.
I still think it's important to have it in there though, because there's stuff in that can turn into advocacy for us.
Right.
Where we can go to our legislators and say, hey, things are not the same in education as they were 20 years ago. We do have to have some kind of idea of where we're going to get teachers from, where we're going to get administrators from, because the schools aren't pumping them out like they used to.
I agree with that, Jane, but I think what's going to happen is Doug's going to get into this. And then we may very well decide, Doug may well decide, that when we release it, it's going to be another work session like this. So it's not like, because right now we pick and choose and grab things from everywhere, but that's a good point. So I really think what's going to have to happen, and Doug is going to find out, that we're going to do another work session on this. But right now, there's no framework to it. So it's like squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. So,
and luckily Mary Jo has volunteered to do a survey of other districts because I want to see what they have in their strategic plans. Oh, thank you, you guys didn't get that text. But because they might have something in theirs,
Yeah.
haven't thought about it. So just seeing what's out there, I think is good.
But also, there's a very important point, and a lot of that is just made. Sorry. It's about making, let's say, district, or district planning conferences, these ratings that are out there, right? And maybe not some of them be exactly accurate, but we do need to look at how we stack up against it. Because of
A lot of people do.
Part of my goal as a board member, and I reread, I don't know, that review article or whatever, the things I wanted to try to find, like, yeah, or whatever it was at the time. So it's that when people come move to Western New York, they want to come here.
Yeah, and I
I
think
feel it's important that we understand how we stack up.
whether we agree with how they're pulling the data, if it's something that's published, we should be aware of it because that creates a perception. And sometimes perception creates a reality, and that's where we have to make sure we are a leading factor when people talk about great schools, that Iroquois is included in that bracket.
And
Period. I feel that way, and unfortunately, sometimes you have to do things that you think, well, it might be better value to do something else, but you have to stay in that top group to have the right community and everything being part of you.
And I really think we're just, like what Heather said, is why when you get done with that, I think you have to report it out in a work session like this, because then you can actually have a meaningful conversation. And Heather, you come with your plan, and it's great, and then Heather says, no, we really should add this to it, and then we have a discussion, and then it goes in or it goes out.
Yeah.
So what's happening now is really cool. I think it's important, but I think I really don't think we do it at a board meeting. I think in February, we're going to do it at a work session, so we can have this type of conversation. So, okay.
And it's just, I'm sorry to dwell on it, and I know we're getting close to being done, but superintendent spent a lot of time talking about the ratings, and should you just go after the ratings and get a good score, or should you take care of the students with instruction? And it's finding that happy balance between the two.
Well, it's understanding the data behind the ratings stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And quick wins and things that we can.
I'll turn it on.
No, we got it.
But I think ultimately,
Try to flag here.
I mean,
I think
I think that's important, but ultimately, I'm expecting that we do the right thing, right? And that's fundamentally the core, right? We got to do the right thing each and every day, and we have to, if we're going to publish something, it has to be useful and have some meaning behind it. And so I think this is kind of the direction, and the other pieces should fall into place.
No, I agree. Nor do we have any guests?
We have two guys, I don't know if they're talking.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Do we need an executive session? No. I am making the motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. There is, are we all here? 7 in favor of adjourning, Nora.
Got it.
Really get it.
Thank you.